All right, thank you everyone for joining us today. So first part of our first topic today is going to be on Power BI and BI again. So as we've had different topics in the past around Power BI. As much as we're a SharePoint group, we're SharePoint and everything around it group. So we like to keep everyone kind of informed, updated around supporting tool sets that circle around SharePoint. So with that, thank you for Fulton Analytics and Jacob here for presenting on this. So with that, Jacob, take it away.
All right. Yeah, my name is Jacob Gaylord. I'm a data consultant for Fulton Analytics. We are a Minnesota-based data analytics and strategy consulting company. So I'll be presenting two real-time operations dashboards that we created for two construction companies. And the first is covering field productivity, and the second covers project management and shop production. So yeah, I'll just jump right into it. Just first, all this data is fictional. It's meant for demo purposes only, so nothing proprietary here. Yeah, so this first report just concerns field productivity and is used to sort of increase efficiency in pre-construction and bidding, and as well as the logistics of ongoing projects. So this company that we worked with, they had somewhere around 300 active jobs most of the time, and they had, what we started with was just their budgeted and actual hours. So in the upper left here, you can sort of see that 220K budgeted hours and 89,000 actual hours. Remaining hours is how many they have left in the budget. So they wanted to see how many hours they've used versus how complete the project is. They wanted those to line up as much as they possibly could. So those are just the basic metrics that we started out with. And then over on the upper right here, we created these productivity factor and wage efficiency. So this is just a derived value about how many hours per unit and the units completed. And wage efficiency has to do with budgeted and actual wages to make sure that everybody's getting paid correctly according to the budget. And then for more lower level people, sort of making sure the project is going well, they can look at the specific trades here on the project and see, what trades are falling behind in terms of productivity factor, and what who's falling behind in terms of wages as well. So then I'll move down to the bottom portion of the report here. Earned hours is the amount of time it takes to complete each unit and how many units have been completed. So it's sort of a way to see at this current stage where should our hours be, and so it's at 83,000, but our actual hours are 89,000. So in this case, it would be 6,000 hours over the current budget there. And next, we've got forecasted hours, which is how many hours the job will take if the productivity factor remains. So they're forecasted out to take 235,000 hours, whereas they're only budgeted for 219,000. So they've got a disparity there of 16,000 hours. And this next one, projected hours, this was their own sort of metric there that their project managers would basically say, they have to come in on a monthly basis and say, how many hours are we projected to take? How many hours do you think they would take? So in this case, the project manager is saying it's still only going to take 219,000 hours, actually saying that there's going to be 428 hours under budget. So that's just sort of a way to keep those project managers accountable. And you can look at this bottom portion here. There's a historical view of how the budget forecasted has changed over time. So on this project, they never quite got under their goal. They just sort of they met their goal at certain different periods, and this is just a great way to at a glance view that, and then that brings them to their current state where they're budgeted for 219,000 and forecasted for 235,000. So this is more of a high-level dashboard for those in the construction industry. People like a VP of pre-construction might be looking at this, but then it's also meant for those lower-level project managers. So one thing you can do is right-click. This is something you can set up in Power BI. You can right-click on a trade here and go and look at that individual trade's metrics. So here I chose piping. So we got 49,000 budgeted hours and 16,000 actual hours. And below that is a table where you can see all the different sequences and where they are in the process with that. Some of these are over 100%, and that just means that they went over the budgeted hours, or for percent complete, they went over the budgeted units. So, and then they're highlighted red if the productivity factor is below 1. So, and moving on to the right, this is another pretty similar to what we had before on the bottom portion of the page, but this is sort of that ongoing forecast where we're saying this is where our hours should be and this is where they are. So piping is doing pretty well. You want these lines to match up as much as you possibly can. So at the bottom right here, this is historical wage efficiency. So I've got a dotted line to show where they want to be. And you can see throughout the months that they've maintained pretty consistent with their wages, their budgeted wages, and what they actually paid out. So that's all for this one. I'll go ahead and just jump into the next one. This one has to do more with project management in the construction space. And this was a company that was sort of concerned with some of their project management and shop production aspects. And this is a high level as well as a low level dashboard to help sort of identify where a project may or may not be slowing down. So this page is broken up by commercial, industrial, and residential jobs. So you can sort of click through the different types of jobs. That's how they ended up splitting their jobs up. So it was just an easy way for them to find their jobs more easily. So on the upper right, we've got a scatter chart that just shows what jobs are over or under budget. So you can kind of see, where your job is on here, and really find those jobs that are really getting out of control, really going over budget. And then just a simple map visual broken up by commercial, industrial, and residential jobs on the bottom right. So the way that this one works is that you'll select a job on here. These graphs to the right will update, and you can view your project management, you can view your shop production. So I'll jump into project management first. So they had two big metrics when it comes to project management, and that's their RFIs and submittals. And basically, they're pretty similar. It's just how long it takes to turn one of these in. So RFI is request for information, and submittal is something they use for drawing. So they're submitting something to be approved by an architect or something like that. So they could view their total, closed, open, and late, just numbers there. And this gauge has their target of 7 days. They want their turnaround in 7 days. So they're a little bit over here, and then on their submittals, they're a little bit under, so it turns green. And then you can sort of see how that has changed over time, and identify any peaks that you might want to investigate further. So yeah, again, this is a little bit more of a high level dashboard, something that people more high level in the company would look at, but it's also, you can click through on any of these cards and let's say you just want to look at closed RFIs. That'll bring you to a table view here, and you can see, who are the responsible managers and when was it initiated, when was it due, that sort of thing. And then as well as some visuals up here, so you can see what managers have the latest and how many late RFIs does each manager have there. So yeah, and whenever you want to go back to the home page, all you do is click the logo. The reason we did it that way is because that's how their system, that's how their main thing worked. So they're using Procore, which is a construction project management software, and that's just what they're used to. So we try to model it after stuff that they're already familiar with. So run into shop production here a bit. So again, two main metrics here. We can see drawings and fabrications, and they had sort of a similar metric to the other company where they could measure how productive they were being, and so they have 75% complete, a good productivity factor, and they can view the status of all their current drawings, as well as how productive the responsible shops are. So pretty much the same thing with fabrications as well. So yeah, that is it for the report. And again, you can drill through on these and go to the more lower level look. That's it for the report. I just want to run through quickly how you'd go about embedding these into your SharePoint or Teams environment. So we actually, this one we did end up embedding it into their SharePoint environment. So quickly, I just want to discuss what a workspace is in Power BI. So as you can see, these are my workspaces. They're basically just folders for different Power BI services that you can put into different workspaces, and that's really how you control accessibility or roles and permissions, that sort of thing. So that's all in the settings on these different workspaces. So once you've got your report uploaded to the Power BI service, so if you don't know, you start developing a report in the desktop, and then you publish that out to the Power BI service, which is meant for sharing, and you can look through. Yeah, you could share it out to people in your organization rather than having to send them a file. So once it's in this Power BI service, if you want to embed it into a SharePoint site, what you'll have to do is click File when you're on the report and go down to Embed Report, click SharePoint Online, and copy that secure link. And then I'm just going to add a new page to this demo here. And click this plus. And if it doesn't pop up right here, you can always just search Power BI. And once you find it, it'll pop up this box. And you just paste the report link there. There are a couple of options that you can do once it's loaded in. So if you just want one page to be shown, all you got to do is flick this off. So they can't navigate in between the tabs. And this is whatever the roles in your workspace are, that's going to be the same. It's going to transfer over to SharePoint. So if you've got permissions and things that certain people, you don't want them to see, you'll have to control that through the Power BI service. But that will all transfer over to SharePoint. You can also show the filter pane or choose not to on here. So that's basically it for SharePoint. I'm going to run through how you get this into Teams. So I've got a demo team set up here, and all you do is add a tab. You can select Power BI if you use it, often, or you can search it again, and this will pop up your workspaces. So in this case, it's in my workspace. So you can choose to post about it or not post about it, and then you click save, and this tab is just named whatever the title of the report is. And this is an issue that sometimes comes up. If you have saved the report looking at a different page, then that's the page that it will pop up on. So one thing you got to do is make sure you're on the landing page that you want to be on when you save that report, so that they're not seeing a page that you might have been working on or something. You want them to always, land on that home page. So there's a couple cool things about this. You can just start a conversation here, and write any kind of messages you want in between who's ever on the team here, and this will be directly connected to the report. So when you're looking at the report, you can look at what other people on your team might have to say about it. So yeah, that's basically it. And I'll go ahead and just open it up for questions if anybody has anything about Power BI or how to embed permissions and things like that.
Yeah, Jacob, can you talk about why the construction industry is starting to use analytics and some of those things?
Yeah, so a little bit different between these two reports. So this field productivity, it really it's they want to analyze very specifically where their downfalls are coming from. So they've got certain for this example, certain trades that are doing really well, and that they don't need to look at, and they really just want to focus where they're intervening and saying to those project managers that this is what we need to do. We need to we need to get moving on this project, basically, and otherwise, for example, for this project, if you're going to be 16,000 hours over your budget, I mean, that's a $1 million loss on their part. So that's for that. And then for the project management thing is basically the same thing, but it's very hard to keep track of when you've got a project with 10 different project managers and different companies associated with it. So this connects basically directly to their Procore environment. So on this table down here, they can look at that URL and it'll bring them to that Procore page. So then they can get a more detailed view on what company, what manager is responsible, and they can sort of intervene and say, why is this 79 days late? It shouldn't be that late. So, and then as well as shop production, they can really look into that and say, okay, some of our shops are doing great. Why are these shops struggling? And then they can really allocate certain resources to those shops to move along the project. So at the end of the day, it's all really a time-saving dashboard. So both of these companies, they both had large Excel spreadsheets, which the people that really knew the business problems, they could filter it out and eventually get to these same insights. But they always wanted something to show to just quickly get those insights, so that they didn't always have to go to the VP of pre-construction who understood the problem the best. So yeah, it's really a time saver. You can more easily delegate some of these projects and logistic things to those lower level people. So yeah, that's why I would say that mostly they're sort of diving into the analytics. It's just for mainly efficiency growth and monitoring, real time how they see these projects are going, and if they can jump in quickly and fix a problem, then it'll save them tons of money at the end of the project. So
yeah, that's great, Jacob. And how often is the data being refreshed?
let's see. I think this for the project management, it is twice a day. For this productivity demo, this field productivity one, this would be, I believe, 4 times a day. So they want pretty real-time data, not huge data sets, but they need that feedback right away. This only goes till March, but on the real version of this dashboard, they would have today's data, so they'd be able to see what sequences, what trades are falling behind on a real-time basis. So
Okay, one question in the chat is the licensing. So to share these reports or data sets via Teams or SharePoint, what subscription is required to share?
right, so everybody needs a Power BI Pro license. Anybody who's going to be looking at this. Otherwise, what you'll see is a sign-in page. So yeah, that's and the same thing for Teams as well. Let's see. So, oh yeah, here it is. Okay, yeah, same thing for Teams as well. It runs through those workspaces. So if you don't have a Pro license, you're not going to be able to see these reports.
Yep, and to kind of extend upon that, yeah, so Power BI Pro license, it can be standalone or it's a part of the E5 from the Microsoft 365 perspective. And then on the SharePoint side and other portals, Power BI Embedded potentially is an option as well, where you could embed it for an unlimited amount of folks with a different licensing model. So it kind of all depends what you're doing overall.
Yep, absolutely. And in terms of permissions and things like that, that all runs through the workspace as well. So if you don't want someone to see a certain report, but they have access to that SharePoint site, you can always it'll always roll back to these permissions in these workspaces. So let's see. So you can just edit those permissions here, and whatever you post it on, it'll always run through that, and whatever account they're signed in on through their Microsoft 365, that's the permissions they'll get. So
another question I have, what are you guys seeing with like that Teams integration and discussing everything? So right, you've talked a lot about, hey, we see variability or something we don't want to see in the data. Have you started to see more people using like chat in Teams or using Teams to do the human side of figuring it out and making decisions? Or what are you guys seeing with Teams integration, like in that way, with going into chat, things like that?
yeah, mainly what I've seen is well, I mostly see the starting point of where they are, and it's a lot of the questions in the chat will be something like why can't I see this certain page? Why do I only see one line here? And that's because the row level security and the different permissions they might have. So that's what I've seen in the chat. But I know that for those companies that are really invested into Teams, some of those Teams channels can get really disorganized really quickly if everyone's just starting a new conversation for everything that they want to do, right? So this is a really good way to everybody that's sort of involved in this report can quickly just type something in the chat, and then they don't have to reach out to that specific person who may be the owner of this report. Anybody that knows that answer can just get back to them quickly and say, yeah, this is why this is like that, or did you mess with some filters, and that's why you're getting incorrect data here. So that's how I've seen it used. I'm not sure on a large scale, how many people in a Teams channel, but on the smaller scale, for sure, this tab conversation, this conversation tab is really good for efficiency and getting it to the right people, because you don't always need to bother whoever created the report with all your questions, so you can get your answers for whoever is involved and has a little bit of experience with it. So
good. Yeah, and for our group, for those that were on a little earlier, we call ourselves a SharePoint group, but it's so much beyond that and everywhere around that these days. But a lot of our role day in and day out is, kind of bringing all these things together for folks. So I know I have, started in SharePoint in this space, got into Teams, got into everything else around it. But us helping guide people to collaborate, I think that's a great point, is, helping them organize those conversations around the data. I think our type of role on the SharePoint side typically involves Teams these days, and we can be helpful there. All right. And then Robert and Jacob, if you want to just kind of get contact info into the chat when you're ready there too. That was another question.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Any other questions, Jacob? Anything else on your end?
Oh, I think that pretty much covers it.
All right. All right. Well, thank you. All right. Well, I'm gonna jump in next. So second topic we're going to kind of cover here is the Adoption Hub. So what's great about the Adoption Hub for me is it combines a lot of different tools and techniques as well, and is a great example for everyone to understand, kind of different things like Power Virtual Agents and the like. So so I'm going to put in a chat right away, kind of a link to this. So the Adoption Hub was started by a group of folks at Microsoft as a Teams app to pull a couple things together. Help organizations adopt and use Teams. Right, a lot of people rolled out Teams last year quickly for different reasons, and pandemic being one of them. But this tool, is a Teams app that pulls together a bunch of things that's done in a simple but powerful way. So step one, you can add a chatbot on there, a virtual power agent named Timon, into the Adoption Hub, so that chatbot can answer questions related to Teams and help people adopt it. It pulls in your existing SharePoint portals, sites. So say you have a technology portal homepage for your IT group, or it's just your intranet as a whole in SharePoint Online. You can bring that into the right spot here for your organization to find it while staying within Teams. You can set up training courses. So maybe you're having, in-person or virtual training courses at a given point in time. That is going to be a SharePoint list that we'll look at. That, for us in this type of a group, it's pretty straightforward, but it's very powerful. Showing kind of that list of upcoming courses that people can sign up for. The next is it ties in the Microsoft Learning Pathways solution. So if you haven't seen that, we'll show that a little bit. But there is a predefined kind of template out there for learning off of the SharePoint lookbook that you can provision into your tenant. With that, it's got some pre-built content or prepackaged content around Teams, SharePoint, OneDrive. So we'll look at that a little bit. Again, and you can customize it from there. It's a SharePoint site in the end that you can control, manage, and maintain. The focused learning section will show, that's the Microsoft support articles and training articles that's in Teams already, but also this just pulls it all together for you. And then finally, a survey, a feedback survey, right? What are you missing from your adoption training that you need to know about so that you can you can make your adoption program better. And this is just a Microsoft Forms form, but that simply allows you to ask those questions, get that feedback, so that you can process it overall. All right, so those are the components. What it looks like in the end is going to be something like this. So first and foremost, it's a Teams app. So a Teams app shows up on the left-hand side here of Teams. So you can create your own Teams apps. So we have one called The Point, that's our SharePoint intranet as a Teams app. This will soon be, you can use the Viva Home app and things like that for going forward, but you can kind of create your own apps. The Adoption Hub, then that app has a chatbot connected to it. So this friendly little guy, that's Timon, and we'll go under the covers of this shortly. But this is a kind of a pre-built Power Virtual Agent that runs in kind of Dataverse. So with Power Virtual Agents for Teams in this case, you can create and use, you can load this and use this chatbot as a Power Virtual Agent included with kind of your e-licensing, your E3s, E5s, things like that. So we will kind of walk you through that, but Timon here, you can ask certain questions. Here's some example of how do I add people to the team. So I can simply go into the chat, people can ask questions, Timon will go and respond to that. There you go. So it has topics, it gives that back answers, if it was helpful, you say, yes, that was helpful, and you can kind of train it based on this feedback people will give it overall. So we'll peel that back. Technology home here, this is just kind of a link to a SharePoint online site. In my case here, this is the SharePoint success site as an example, just another lookbook template overall. From an instructor-led training perspective, here's that list of upcoming training events that you can manage in a SharePoint list. That being said, I've tweaked this a little bit, being a SharePoint guy, to just put a different view on it. So instead of just a simple listing of entries in a Microsoft list, SharePoint list, I have actually just turned this into that gallery view, but you could take that even farther. Next, here's that tab to learning pathways. So again, this is yet another SharePoint Online site that we're mapping out, but inside of here, you can start clicking on different training paths. Like here's the Microsoft 365 training that's built in. You can build and configure learning pathways. based on product, based on your own tools. As an admin, you can create your own content and put it in here in different ways. But in this case, let's say I need some OneDrive training, I can start clicking through here. Here's a OneDrive quick start. And for those that are in this world a lot, you can start seeing this starts pointing at some of the curated content out on SharePoint or out on Microsoft's sites. But it brings it together and curates it and pulls it all together for your users so that they have kind of a one-spot shop for things like learning. Teams HowTo, here again, this is just another tab. So these are different tabs across the adoption bot. The Teams HowTo is related to Teams, welcome Teams, and training. If you really know Teams well, that's the same thing that happens when you go over here and go to your help and training and things like that. So again, it's just bundling it all together. So I think there's a lot of power in bringing everything together for your users. And in this case, here's yet another solution. And then finally, here's the feedback form, which is, a Microsoft Forms form. So you can build it, have, different types of questions and logic and conditioning as needed. So, and in this case, you can build whatever form that makes the most sense to you overall, but you then tie that all together. So then what we've also done inside of this space is, we've kind of built out, kind of a Teams provisioning concept as well to request kind of new teams. So this was built off of a template as well, but then we kind of advanced it where instead of allowing maybe anyone to create teams on their own, just create a team, we've built kind of a model that allows them where they can pick templates or do other things. And then we can put different rules behind the scenes. So, if you want a company-wide team, you can request it, but maybe it needs an approval before you automatically provision it. Or you can apply a naming convention, or you automatically apply private or public visibility, or you apply a sensitivity label or something to your category or template based on what you're trying to do. So again, this is just a Power App and ultimately a flow too that kind of does everything overall behind the scenes. All right, so that is the Adoption Hub. So now let's go into the covers. So from there, let's go over to the chatbot or the Power Virtual Agent. So in Teams, you can add this Power Virtual Agents app. So if I go find an app, add Power Virtual Agents, that's where these live. I'm going to go over to my chatbots. And there is Timon. So if I go into Timon, the deployment guide talks about this. You basically are importing kind of a pre-built chatbot as a zip file, importing it into your environment to get this Timon chatbot. What you get out of that is these pre-built topics. So now Timon has 120 topics built into it already. So, if you want to know what is shifts in Teams, there's a topic that Timon can help answer. And how this works is you have a topic, you can give it a friendly name. Then you start doing, the chatbot things, like what would trigger this topic to happen. So here you start finding all the phrases that people might use to kind of ask the same question here about what is shifts in Teams. So all these different trigger phrases, and you can add your own. So while this starts with 120 topics and its own set of phrases, you can definitely add and change these. Then for the topic as well, okay, so now you've triggered it. What do you want to do? Power Virtual Agents is a low to no code option where you can, similar to Power Apps, Power Automate, but now chat focused. So now once we're triggered, we start sending back these answers. Okay, well, if they trigger it, then go many wish, blah, blah, blah. Then we send this message, then we send a link to watching this video, and then we send this message. So overall, and I'll take this and test this out to show you, but it's as simple as that. So, hey, you asked this question, here are the answers. So you can test this in Power Virtual Agents right on the screen here. So I'm going to try to trigger this off. And you can see, for those that do Power Automate, similar Power Automate, you kind of see where you're at in the flow, and what has happened. Successfully done it, triggered this condition, whatever you need to do. So that is Timon. So it's pre-built with a lot of topics, so you get a lot of value out of it as a starting point. You would then want to look at your overall analytics here for the chatbot to see what's happening in the wild. So this won't have a lot of good data in it in my environment here for the demo, but what you can start to see with the analytics is, what is the engagement? What's getting escalated with no answer, right? Where people are saying, I asked a question, but I didn't get an answer. What should I do? So with that, you start getting, kind of who's using it, what's the outcome, are people saying that they got the answer they're looking for? Are they abandoning it? And then you tweak that, right? So you can start looking at what topics are popular, what's kind of going on overall. Two of the topics here, I'll also dig into because they're a little more advanced. So there are two topics inside of Timon to cover as well. So one is, you want to escalate, like talking to an agent, right? So you want people to have an out to say, the chatbot's great, but I'd love to talk to a person about this. So you can go ahead and, kind of create your different trigger phrases, like talk to an agent, talk to someone, and the like. In this type of a flow, what happens near the end is you'll ultimately call a Power Automate flow, and or just notify a Teams channel about something. In this case, we're calling a flow to notify a Teams channel. So there's a Power Automate flow that comes around and uses my Timon app, and it can either, based on a feedback or questions, ultimately just sends that feedback into a channel conversation for people to monitor and respond back with a one-to-one chat and the like. So this chatbot can, trigger off into the rest of Teams, mainly kind of an admin or support team for the adoption, or there's a slightly different view of this, which is, I know this isn't like an admin question, but maybe you have a champions group in your organization and you just want to ask a question, right? This is a general question that I have. So you can have at some point have the bot send a question into like a champion group. And these two are separated because maybe you want to use your champion group as a team of like power users you have in your organization and not the IT technical support team or somebody else. So overall, with the chatbot and Timon specifically, there's basically two outs into kind of a group, a channel conversation that can kick off at the end. But honestly, you can start doing other things, right? You could create a flow and send it into, another system, ServiceNow, and create a ticket. Ultimately, you could make this your own in the end, and use flow and other techniques to take the chatbot and turn it into something in another system. All right. So that's the chatbot and Timon, and what you kind of get out of that. Let me go to, kind of the configuration of this. Just looking at the Teams app side of things, what you get with the Adoption Hub. Well, let's back up. So to create a Teams app, you can use App Studio inside of Teams. You have to be aware of kind of any policies you may have in place that may block apps or not inside your organization. So your admins may block this for you. Then you'd have to work through this a little bit for making this Teams app available. But once you get into App Studio inside of Teams, the Adoption Hub is something you can import to get started. So I've imported it already. So once I get in here, this is where you can start naming it what you want, making it, something unique for your organization. This is where you're going to reference that Timon chatbot that's been built in a previous step. But then you'll have these different tabs you can add. So those are the things across the top of a Teams app. And in this case, you're doing a couple things. So like taking one of these SharePoint sites, what you're doing is you're ultimately going into and pointing to just a SharePoint site URL. So in this case, I have, kind of a site's SharePoint success site URL and site collection that the app is pointing to. But the magic of Teams tab and it is really around single sign-in. So what you have to account for is if I'm in the desktop version of Teams, for example, while each tab is basically an iframe into, kind of a website somewhere, and that technically is true. If that tab or that site needs your logged in user ID, you're going to have to think about single sign-in. So the good news is Teams and SharePoint Online are very friendly together, but you have to know this little trick. So there is a, kind of a system page for Teams login.aspx. It's in the layouts folder of every site collection. So those that have seen layouts files before, you'll kind of know what I'm talking about. But this little layouts, Teams logon, SPFX, SharePoint Framework, IE, equals true. And then the destination being, that end site. So the same as what you're getting at the end, that is needed so that when you go to the adoption, you go to that tab in your Teams app, it does two things in the SharePoint space. So let me click on that specific link we're talking about. So now it's doing two things. One, it did my single sign-in into this SharePoint site. So it took my login in the Teams desktop client and put it here. But for those that have really played with SharePoint enough, it also allowed SharePoint to be in an iframe. So if you've ever tried to put SharePoint Online in an iframe, it doesn't work. And it'll kick itself. I don't think it just doesn't work. But in this, that's how you can get that to work with that kind of link, that roundabout link to the same page. Then, I'll click on it here. So this is that content URL with that crazy link. This globe in the upper right goes to the site in the browser. And that is the website URL inside of Teams. So I will just go back now and show you that, just in case you've ever seen it or had that question. But on each of these tabs, there were two URLs to pick from. So this content URL is what's iframed inside of Teams itself. And then this URL is what you go to when you hit that globe link. Again, they can be completely different. In this case, they're different, but end up at the same spot. Best practice would be make them go to the same spot, but you theoretically could make them different if you had to. And then just backing up, this is just kind of like a URL path-ish thing inside of Teams. So this can be whatever you need it to be, but it's generally just kind of a shortened version of the name that shows up on the top. All right, so, and then, Microsoft Forms is simpler yet. In that case, you go to the form, you build the form, you share the form and get the URL to it, and you can simply paste that same thing in on both sides here, and then that kind of comes through. So again, the Adoption Hub is a template. It's a starting point. You can add your own things to it. So our workspot example here, we added this ourselves, and that technically is just a page in SharePoint Online with an embedded Power App on that page. So that was a simple way to handle the Power App single sign-in by starting on the SharePoint page first and then kind of going through. So long story to get to there, but that's one way to do it. All right. Last set here, I'm going to just go to the learning pathways side of things, because if you haven't seen that before, just a couple things to note on it. So lookbook.microsoft.com, if you haven't used it, you should, and you should look at it. So it's got a couple things. One, it's got a lot of ideas and templates for SharePoint sites. So, large organizational sites, smaller department sites, individual team types of sites. But there's also solutions in here, and learning pathways is one of the solutions you can pick from. You can, for those that have been using this for a while, these more and more solutions and more templates get added. Some of these templates are also going to start becoming site templates directly in the system in SharePoint Online instead of the look off to the side on the lookbook. So as site templates, which are first the renamed site designs are being renamed to site templates, but also these types of site templates are starting to go into the product instead of off to the side on the lookbook. But back to learning pathways. Learning pathways is one of the solutions. It gives you that starting point I was showing when we clicked on it. But to add it to your tenant, if you're a tenant admin, it can be as simple as, kind of going to Lookbook, logging in as your tenant admin, and then picking the URL and then hitting a magic button to provision it. So it does a remote provisioning type of model. I've already done this in my environment, but you could create kind of something, just pick a site collection that doesn't exist yet in your organization. You might be able to add it to an existing one. I'm not 100% sure off the top of my head, but then you click the provision button and then it would magically go through. Let me go back into the app. So if we go back to the Adoption Hub, go back to Learning Pathways. So then over the next couple minutes, it's going to create this SharePoint Online site. So I'll go to it in the browser. So it's going to create this SharePoint Online site. There is a custom SharePoint framework solution that's deployed to your app catalog as well for this one, but it's going to build out the site. Since we're SharePoint folks, let's go into the covers. But it's going to build all these different lists and assets. It's going to add this app, this Learning Pathways app to your site, but kind of set up everything for you, like these playlists. But ultimately, there is just kind of that magic button. There is that magic button on the lookbook where you can deploy it. Otherwise, there are instructions for learning pathways to deploy it kind of manually. So again, if you aren't a global admin or you don't want to do it this way, again, it's mainly a SharePoint, an SP package file to add to an app catalog somewhere, and then steps to add the app to your sites and things like that. So if you know what you're doing in that space, it's standard, kind of best practice to deploy it. But a lot of people choose to and can hit the magic button here to provision it overall. All right. From there, I think everything else pretty straightforward, so I will pause. Questions, thoughts, comments, anything else I can help explain kind of inside of here?
You have to be a global admin to add this?
The learning pathways?
Yeah.
Yes and no.
Just SharePoint admin?
I think with the remote provisioning, you'd have to be a tenant admin, but with the manual steps, SharePoint admin would be fine. Because ultimately, you just have to add the right things to your app catalog and then build out the site with that app.
Thank you.
All right. So yeah, so that's kind of the adoption hub and how it all comes together. Last thing on that is, the deployment guides out here. So for the adoption hub, so there's detailed steps on how to deploy it and bring it all together. But then also, if you do need help, there's a couple other options. There's been one-to-many guided sessions in a webinar series for the Adoption Hub. Otherwise, through Crossviews, you can also kind of sign up and get kind of a one-to-one session set up if you'd like. So it's usually just 2 1-hour sessions, 1 hour to get the chatbot up and running, another hour to get the Teams app, kind of fully configured for yourself. But ultimately, the steps are documented well, fairly straightforward. What we see in helping people deploy this is, there's a lot of nuance in everyone's environment. The policies they have to restrict things, the URLs they want to use, there's just a couple of variables that might pop up as you're doing it that people can help with. Otherwise, it's fairly straightforward from there. And I think it's a skill set to know how to do in the upcoming years. I think these Teams apps are a great idea, very powerful, very straightforward to bring things together via Teams, because that's going to be the new starting point for a lot of people, more than the browser, more than Windows. But Teams itself, is kind of the quote unquote operating system for business here, and learning how to create your own Teams apps to bring everything together will be a great skill set to know how to do. All right, that's what we have for today. So it'd be a shorter session, but hopefully both topics are valuable enough to pull something from this today. Any final questions from anyone? All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.
Yeah, thanks for putting this together, John.